This is Center Stage, putting lawyers in the spotlight by highlighting attorneys and other industry experts to help take your law firm to the next level. Hey everyone, and welcome to Center Stage. I'm your host, John Henson, and this week wanted to talk to you about a free or maybe a low-cost marketing initiative that you can do that has a lot of really great benefits. I mean, it can be a great referral relationship builder. It can be a good lead generator. And it also is a great way to just help you elevate your expertise. And that is hosting an event. And, you know, whether you're doing this virtually or in person, I thought it would be great to just have an episode dedicated to that, to give you some ideas, to give you some inspiration. And my guest this week, I've worked with him a couple of times. He has a great workshop program online that we will talk about later in the show. But that is Dan Bryan from Marketing for Justice. Dan, thank you for joining us this week.
Thanks so much for having me, John. It's really great to be here.
Awesome. So yeah, before we jump in, you know, what do we need to know about you? Why are we having you on the show this week?
I don't know. No, yeah, like you mentioned, my name is Dan Bryan. I started a online workshop company called Marketing for Justice. And, you know, the last several years I've worked as the digital marketing director for Riddle & Brantley, which is a mid-size personal injury firm in North Carolina. And one of the things that I really was looking for, but could never quite find it, was a group of other legal marketers, for continuing education. And I joined the LMA, Legal Marketing Association, and I just wasn't quite finding the kind of actionable education that I was looking for, things that I could really take away each time and really put into action right away. A lot of it was a little bit esoteric and philosophical, and it just wasn't really the value I was looking for. So I started Marketing for Justice, and we do online marketing workshops for legal marketers. So,
yeah. And we'll talk more about, you know, just how you out there could get more involved in that and learn more about it, join some workshops later on. But yeah, you know, I hosted a couple of these workshops over the summer. They're really great. There's a lot of great engagement. You've really done a good job of building a nice community there. And I think that you have a lot of good insight into just how to develop that and how, you know, an attorney can take that and just kind of do something on their own, just maybe in their community, reaching out and doing some events like that. And so just kind of to start, you know, what really is the value of holding these kinds of educational events?
Well, I think you kind of hit on it at the outset. I mean, the biggest thing for me is it's an opportunity to, you know, not only network, but really position yourself as a thought leader. So for an attorney who may be considering holding an event to educate folks on a particular aspect of their practice area, it's a really great opportunity. It's a really low barrier opportunity to really just get your name out there and associate it with the kind of expertise on a particular subject area that you're working with. So, you know, a personal injury attorney could, you know, host an online workshop really on how to deal with insurance companies. I mean, that sounds maybe a little bit boring, but it's something that, you know, is an everyday thing. A tax attorney could obviously do an online workshop or even an in-person event on preparing your taxes right around tax time. There are so many opportunities for attorneys in particular to position themselves as thought leaders. And, you know, an event, whether it's in person or virtual, is just a really great opportunity to do that.
Yeah. I mean, other examples that I can think of, you know, estate planning attorneys could probably do a lot of good work in churches. And helping, you know, I know churches nowadays are generally more of an older population. So a lot of people still need help with their estate planning, a lot of elder law issues and stuff like that. Business attorneys in sort of like some chamber of commerce settings, you know, and helping other business owners like that. But yeah, so many opportunities there. So now I know your sort of specific expertise, at least as far as I know you, has been in the online world. And I know you have a really good stance on this webinar culture that has kind of blown up, especially since COVID. And I think, and you and I agree on this, like webinars in general are just really boring.
They're terrible.
Yeah, we put on webinars every month here at Spotlight Branding. And when we started doing that, our first webinar series was like January of 2020. And I know when I first started it, I really wanted to make a point to not have them be boring. But in your opinion, why are webinars generally boring?
Oh, well, I think, it's a great question. And honestly, I think we all have some webinar fatigue, like you mentioned, going through COVID. There's just been so many. And if you're anything like me, you get probably 3 or 4 or 5, invites to a new webinar every day in your inbox. They're just a dime a dozen. And I think the biggest answer to your question, probably the best answer that I can come up with, is that they're just one-sided. For the most part, a webinar is, very one directional. So it's just someone talking at you. And people go to events, or they go to networking events, or even other educational events, because they want to meet people and soak up information from other people, but they also want to share their own experiences. And so the fact that most webinars just involve a single speaker talking at you is really kind of a turnoff, I think, for most people. And so people are looking for engagement. They're looking for conversation. They want to connect with people. One of the best ways to learn, I think, is not just, absorbing what someone else is telling you, but also like sharing your own experience, and then, seeing what comes of that, what conversations that might spark. And so I think the biggest disadvantage of a quote unquote traditional webinar is that it's completely one directional. It is not good for building relationships. It's focused solely on the speaker, not the audience. And there's really not much opportunity for engagement, which is where I think the greatest value comes from in learning. Yeah.
And I think another big one for me is just a lot of times people don't, it's just a different energy, like when you're getting up and you're speaking in front of a live audience, I think it's a little bit easier to be a little bit more animated, be more engaging. But when you as a speaker just standing or sitting in front of a computer screen, it can get really boring. Like you just start reading your PowerPoint slides, you get kind of monotone, kind of just dead to the world. You're just as out of it as your audience is, and you're just going through the slides. And so that's, to me, that's what makes it really boring. But then also to your point, there's just not a lot, a chance for engagement. So how do you do that? How do you make webinars and online events a little bit more engaging?
Yeah, well, I mean, like you said, we try to do them in as quote non-webinar-y a fashion as possible. And so to do that, the best thing I think up front is to get people a little bit engaged right from the outset. So we always hold a breakout session, in Zoom or other, online platforms. There's often a breakout session functionality. And so you can break people up into little rooms and they can get acquainted and introduce themselves. And we always invite people to share something, usually a lesson that they've learned or a pain point that they have regarding the topic at hand right at the outset. So everyone feels comfortable, this is a safe space to share, your own perspectives, your own experiences. And, really that sets the foundation, I think, for a much better collaborative experience going forward. So we always do a breakout session. We also intersperse, whoever is leading the workshop, we also intersperse throughout discussion slides. So we'll pause and actually open it up to discussion. And we encourage people, in fact, to unmute themselves and jump right in and share or ask questions. Really, really encourage that. And I always ask, and, of course it depends on the speaker, but we always ask that the speakers that come on, like yourself, we ask if they're willing to let people just jump in with questions at any time. And I feel that really helps. A lot of times on these traditional webinars, people get stuck only asking questions through the chat box, and half the time they don't get answered. Other times they might get a kind of a courtesy shout out that's really not much by way of, an actual substantial answer. And so we encourage people to just unmute themselves and, shout out what they're thinking or what questions they have. And that's a really great way, I think, to keep things a little bit more lively.
And it's such a small change to make, because that was one of the biggest things that I learned from actually hosting your workshops, because prior, when we were just doing our webinars, like we would do that. We would just be like, hey, if you've got a question, throw it in the chat box and we'll have a Q&A, discussion at the end and go back through and answer your questions. But in the way that you had it set up, it just makes a whole lot of sense to just kind of pause after a couple of slides while things are still fresh on people's minds, and maybe clear up some things that you didn't explain as well, or that other people want to learn more about. And so, and that just went such a long way, because, I felt like we had a lot of really good engagement on the workshops that I did with you. And I think just that small change did a lot to really encourage that. And so I thought that was really great. Looking at the other side, what are some other kind of mistakes that people can avoid when they decide to host an event?
Oh man. I think, the one that I didn't cover earlier on that I really want to get out there is that, webinar, and let's stop calling them webinars, by the way. I mean, a workshop, what I call them workshops, because they're a whole lot more engaging than most webinars. But a huge mistake that people make is they use them as an opportunity to sell, as opposed to an opportunity to inform and educate and engage. And, the selling can come after and should come after. So the point of the webinar is not to sell. There are, a lot of internet marketers and that out there that use webinars to sell online courses and that kind of thing. And, you can get all kinds of fancy webinar technology that has a countdown and, all this nonsense that's used to sell. But the real point of like an educational event is just that, to educate. And so it's not the place to sell your products or your services. And it can be really tempting for an attorney or anyone else to do that. It can be tempting for me to do that. To use a workshop to sell more workshops, but that's really not the intent. And so I always encourage anyone who's hosting an event, whether it's in person or online, don't use it as an opportunity to push your products or services. Let that be the follow-up. It's amazing how much value, people get from these events just on their own. And people are amazed, after an event, when you follow up with them and say, hey, you had a great question. I wanted to follow up with you on that. Oh, by the way, we also offer this or whatever that might be able to help you out. And that is so much more valuable long-term than just using the webinar as an opportunity to just sell stuff.
Yeah. And we talk about that a little bit with our clients, and just, from a marketing side, that whole content balance where, it's not just a bunch of self-promotion. It's not all about you. And I think that translates really well to that event side of things, where you're just there to provide information. You're there to be a resource, and you're there to educate. And I think, to your point, maybe there's a small pitch at the end, or you just hold off. And to your point, it's part of your follow up at the end. You get contact information for people who register or attend your event. And now you have a really good, personal, intimate contact follow up sequence that you can do, that you can then tailor that personalized sales pitch to.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, if you go on most webinars, some of them will allow you to see how many people are in the room at one point in time. On ours, we use Zoom, and we don't even use the webinar product. So people can always see how many people are in there. And, the moment that you start selling, or the moment that you start pushing a product or a service, is the moment that number just starts to plummet, and people leave and they check out, and it's a turnoff, quite honestly. Yeah. People go on these things because they want to learn, they want to talk to people, they want to get their questions answered. They don't want to buy something, or be told that they should buy something. And so, I totally agree. I mean, it's an opportunity to present yourself as a thought leader. Do that first, and you're setting yourself up for even more sales down the road if that's your intent.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So one more question here before we kind of start to wrap up a little bit. Let's focus a little bit more on the in-person events. With COVID and everything, I think we're finally all kind of opening back up, unless like another new variant comes and shuts everything down again, which God forbid. But
crazy.
I think in-person events still a good thing to go after, like we mentioned up at the top of the show. Mm-hmm. Whether you're going to like churches, or whether you're hosting events like in your own office or at Chamber of Commerce, whatever it is. Do you have any sort of additional tips for people who are looking to host an in-person event?
Yeah, so we were doing some in-person events before COVID, not actually for Marketing for Justice, but actually for the law firm that I work for full time. And we actually partner with another law firm in town. to do those. And the woman that runs their events for that firm is actually way better at doing in-person events than I am. But one of the things that she always does at the events that we host together is integrate some kind of game or activity that forces people to start talking. And, you know, icebreakers, as they call them, I mean, it can be a little bit uncomfortable, especially for people who don't want to necessarily put themselves out there. I'm actually terrible at networking and doing in-person events. The online format is so much better for me. But, you know, like one thing that we've done, you know, previously is you put a sticker on someone's back that has some kind of word, and then the person, you know, that meets you, you know, they probably have never met you before in their life, but they see that word. And the goal at this initial kind of awkward icebreaker stage is to get that person to say the word without, you know, saying it more or less directly. Is you just make it fun. You know, we've done all kinds of other activities like that. They don't have to be, you know, maybe that's a little bit hokey or cheesy or whatever, but there are all kinds of ways to get people talking. And I have found a lot of success with the ones where, you know, you put a name tag on someone and you have to find the 3 other people in the room that belong to your same group or have the same color name tag or whatever. And it's the same kind of idea as the breakout session in an online event, right? It's just all about getting people to connect, engage, and start talking. Because in my experience with the online events and the in-person ones, you know, once you get people to start talking, it very rarely do people clam up then for the rest of the event. I mean, they continue talking, they continue engaging. If you're comfortable at the outset of the event, chances are you're going to be comfortable for the rest of the time and you're going to stick around. So,
yeah, I think another big one for me, at least for me personally, and then also I've seen this work really well. People are motivated by free food. Man, make it lunch and learn.
Yeah, I'm ashamed that I missed that for sure.
Yeah, but I mean, and it doesn't have to be, you know, super extravagant. I mean, go to Costco or Sam's Club or whatever, get a couple of those, you know, sandwich trays or something like that, and you know, make it a lunch and learn or, you know, an evening event, whatever the case is. But man, people come out for a free meal, and they get the opportunity to get educated and you know, figure out where they need to go next, and maybe, you know, hiring you is that next step. And so all kinds of good information there. Before we head out, talk a little bit about Marketing for Justice. How can people get involved or find out about the next workshop coming up and all that good stuff?
Yeah, cool. So Marketing for Justice is, like I said, it's all about providing digital marketing know-how for legal marketers. So we work with legal marketers of firms of all sizes and practice areas, primarily, I would say, smaller to mid-sized firms, though, but that's not to say that we don't work with people at corporate firms or larger business practices. But it's really just an opportunity for legal marketers to get together once a month, and we focus in on one digital marketing topic. So I know you've been there before to talk about podcasts, talk about referral marketing. We've also done series on SEO and PPC and content marketing, and you know, everything under the sun in the digital world, you name it, we cover it. And we typically do one workshop a month. You can check out what's coming up next at marketingforjustice.com. In the interest of keeping this podcast fresh and relevant forever, I will not say the name of the one that's coming up next, but you can go to marketingforjustice.com and check it out for yourself. So yeah, thank you for asking.
Yeah. And I think it's honestly a great resource, whether you're an attorney or you have an in-house marketer, regardless, like that it's a great resource to do, keep track of the workshops that they're doing, and definitely check out, you know, some stuff that maybe you feel like you need to get some more education in. Having done them myself, there's not going to be a huge sales pitch. I can promise you the workshops that I did not do any sort of like,
following the rules.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. But I mean, it's funny. We talked about it afterwards. I mean, you did have some people that you had conversations with afterwards. So, I mean, this stuff works. You don't have to, you know, do a hard sell everywhere you go. And I think, you know, that can be a lesson harder learned by some than others, but I think for sure it works.
Yeah, absolutely. So one last question here before we wrap it up. It's a question we ask every guest here on Center Stage. And that is, if you had one piece of advice for our lawyer listeners out there, what would it be?
Oh man, that's I don't know exactly if I had one piece of advice, but I think, what I would say is just from my own experience in digital marketing and marketing on behalf of law firms, I think you never hurt yourself by experimenting. And if you approach everything with the mindset that you may and you probably will fail, 9 times out of 10, you're going to fail. But that one time out of 10 that you're going to hit the money and really knock it out of the park, it's all worth it from there. And so there are so many opportunities to test new ideas and challenge yourself to, try new tactics in digital marketing. And I would just recommend that people try as much as they can, as often as they can, and, take what works and go with it.
Yeah. I think that's just that second level of marketing that I think a lot of people who, kind of do it on their own don't think about. But yeah, man, A/B test everything.
Yes.
Test subject lines in emails, test calls to action, all kinds of stuff. Anytime you can do that, definitely do that and track that data. That's the other key thing. You can test all you want, but if you're not paying attention to the data and which A/B test works better than others, then you're kind of wasting your time there. But definitely track the data. That is the key part of that for sure. Well, I think that's going to wrap it up for us this week. Thank you all so much for continuing to listen, for all the feedback that we're getting. Rate and review us. Continue to do that on Apple Podcasts. Subscribe on YouTube. Just wherever you're consuming the show. We really do appreciate it. And that's going to do it for this week. Dan, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks so much, John. Take care.
All right, we'll see you next time.
We'll see you.
Thanks for listening. To learn more, go to spotlightbranding.com/centerstage.